Hello, and welcome to Candid Conversations. I am Kelly Fenner, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer with the Baltimore County Police Department. Candid Conversations is an environment designed to engage in conversations that have the potential to enrich and broaden one's cultural awareness and strengthen community relations with law enforcement. Today's discussion will be with members of the LGBTQ plus community. As I call your name, can you please introduce yourself and briefly state why you agreed to be a part of today's discussion? Cassie.
Hello, I'm Cassie Miller. I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for the Baltimore County Public Library. And I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation today, both to share my own experience as a trans woman and also to be able to learn from the experiences of other people in the panel and to generally broaden people's perspectives on what it means to be part of the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you, Cassie. Dee.
Uh, my name is D. Johnson. I'm a firefighter paramedic with the Baltimore City Fire Department and a registered nurse at Johns Hopkins Hospital in the ED. I just like to be a part of panel discussions like this to give and gain perspective. I think it's important to have a very multifaceted 360 view of any topic, just so that even if you don't agree, you take something away and you leave something with it.
Thank you. Mosette.
Mosette Timmons. I'm a member of the Baltimore City Fire Department, lieutenant for the Baltimore City Fire Department. I'm also a Chief Master Sergeant for the United States Air Force out of Andrews. I did it to give some insight on the military aspect of it. It's changed several times over the years. I'm looking at 29 years, so I've been through a lot of the changes. It's just to give some education on the military and its aspect of the LGBTQ community. So,
Thank you. And Tiffany.
Hello, good day, everyone. My name is Tiffany Dyson. Unlike the rest of you good folks, I am situated out of Washington, D.C., and I work for the Agency for International Development. And I decided to join this conversation today because I think it's important just to hear multiple perspectives. And I would like to share, my thoughts to help someone else learn more about what it is to be LGBTQ and what that means.
Thank you, Tiffany. My first question would be to anyone who speaks up first. What does pride mean to you?
To me, pride is about connecting to our history. So the origins of pride began with the Stonewall riots in the 1960s. And from there, it became this really a national movement for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans rights. And so for me, it's being a part of something larger than myself and celebrating the full community and the richness that the community brings to our larger community around us.
I think pride, when I hear it, I just think of what the opposite is, like shame. And there's so much shame attached to this lifestyle. And like to remove that stigma, I just, you got to use the opposite word. I think it kind of emboldens people and gives people that have some issues with possibly coming out, or whether it be family or friends or work, whatever the case may be, it kind of gives you some confidence as you adjust to this lifestyle because it is very different.
I would say pride to me is being unapologetically you and celebrating that. Especially as I'm a foreign service officer, and as I go overseas, it's still being unapologetically me whatever that constitutes, even in other places, even in other situations.
For me, it was a support system in the beginning, because like I said, in the military, it was frowned upon. It was downright, you could not be. So that period gave us, I say us, because there were a lot of us, that opportunity to have someone to go and talk to and hang out with and not feel like you're in a shell by yourself. So it was for me, it was a big thing to have that time or those people that I could go and associate with and not worry about repercussions.
Thanks. Tiffany, you mentioned being unapologetically yourself, in a sense that's being authentic. Why is it necessary for you to be authentic at all times?
First and foremost, in my opinion, it's important because it affects your mental health. Not being able to be who you are on the inside, outside, has damaging effects. It's been seen over time that not being suppressed in any kind of way is not healthy. And first and foremost, I think that the well-being of people, it's important to be able to be yourself, whoever that is to you.
I offer that same question to the rest of the panel. Why is it important or necessary to be your authentic self?
For me, it's true happiness. If you can't be authentic within yourself, how can you say you're happy? And how can you be happy with others if you're not happy? I learned a long time ago that if I wasn't gonna be authentic and true to who I am, then it would, what was the purpose? Um, I grew up where I thought my parents would shame or be ashamed of who I was, and it was the direct opposite. And that for me opened the door that enlightened me and gave me the confidence to be the authentic person that I could be. And I think I smile every day. I look at people on a daily basis and watch them walk through life with a frown on their face. And to me, that's why, because you have to be true to yourself. Because in the end, that's all you have is yourself. So if you don't have that authenticity to get out there and do what you want to do or be who you need to be, then you need to take a step back and gather yourself and be true to yourself. That's what it means to me.
I think just being true to myself, I'll speak about me. It just gave me the confidence to do so many things that people just don't necessarily think that they can do. Like I pretty much came in a very accepting household. There was never any like shame attached to this lifestyle for me because I had my aunt was also gay, so it was kind of like she laid the groundwork for everybody accepting it, so it wasn't a big deal. So for me, it was a bit of normalcy with that, and it allowed me to explore so many other things and not have to dig into what does it mean to be gay, because around the house it was like, okay, you're gay, next, how are your grades, how are your social skills developing. All these other things became more important and at the forefront, so I never had to focus on it. It also gave me the confidence to step out and into the world and not think of it, not like wear it, but wear it, if that makes sense. I didn't have to always be so cognizant of it and just focus on developing like relationships with people based on who they are and selling myself based on who I am, not what I choose to do behind closed doors.
For me, authenticity means bringing my full self to the table. If I weren't living authentically, I would be hiding behind a mask. And so people wouldn't really be able to see me or everything that I have to offer. And so the value of authenticity is that we bring all of our richness and perspective to share with other people. And so that goes beyond being a part of the LGBTQ community. To me, everyone should be their authentic selves, because that's the best way we can all see the richness and diversity of our perspectives and really learn from one another.
Thanks, Mo and Dee. You had a supportive family. How can the rest of us be better allies?
I don't think it. So I try to tell people that the focus when you get to know people should just be like their personality, like those traits. What's important? I think oftentimes when at least I remember being younger, because kids can be extremely judgmental. um, Meeting people and before I can even get a hello or how are you, I was like, gay? What are you gonna do to me? Like it's some plague or something. So I think the biggest thing that people can do is just stop treating it like it's something that needs to be addressed. Like it's the elephant in the room. It's really not. I often wonder sometimes how like straight people feel walking into a heavy like gay presence. Like, do they know I'm straight? Is it? Can I speak freely? Can I be myself? So I feel that way when I walk into a room that is a heavy like heterosexual presence. Like, do we have to discuss me in that way, or can I just be me? So I think if we stop putting so much focus on it, it probably eases the transition as you get to know people, because it becomes like an afterthought. Like, oh, okay, man, you're a great person. Wow, you have a wife. Oh, cool. Instead of you got a wife, forget everything else. I don't want to know anything else about you. I don't agree with that. So it's about reshifting the focus.
Anyone else? How can we be a better ally?
I have to agree with Dee. I found out most people got to know me, the person, before they got to know what was going on in my bedroom, so to speak. And they like me as a person. So at that point, nothing else mattered. I found out that if people get to know you, the true you, they tend to overlook the small things. And which it is, it's small. If you really step back and look at it, it's their what they prefer to do. It has nothing to do with you. It's just what they prefer to do. Their personality, the way they treat you, becomes more of an important aspect than their personal space. So agreeing with thee, if you treat someone like my mom always tells me, you can't judge a book by its cover. If you get to know who that person is and truly like that person, it won't matter what they're doing beyond their closed doors. So that's my opinion.
I think my experience is a little bit different just because I am visibly trans. And so, it's not something that people might not assume. Like, people see me and they might realize that I'm trans. And so for me, I think the important thing is to remember that even though I am trans, I'm still the same person that I was before. In fact, I might be even more me than I was before, more authentically me than I was before. And the other piece that I think is really important, particularly for trans women, is just remembering the importance of safety. And so a really good ally will be someone who thinks about the safety of the situation we're in, and helps me look after myself, and helps look out for me as well.
If I could just weigh in really quickly, um, I think the key to allyship, period, including with the LGBT community, is to stop and assess and or reassess the biases by which you view things or people, and those assumptions that you make going into something. Um, to take that moment, because inherent biases are hard to combat. So taking that extra moment to stop and think, is this something that I know to be true, or is this something that I'm assuming about someone because the way I perceive them, or because of things that I know for myself that may or may not be true. So I think that's really the first step, is taking that moment. And then after that, all these other things fall into line. What does that mean to you? If that means to you making sure that you're safe in your environment, that's one thing. Making sure that I look at you and judge you by your character is another thing. I think all those things start to fall in line after you stop and, check yourself. And I think that's important to any allyship.
Thanks, Tiffany. We're talking about today and how you feel today and in this moment. But if we want to backtrack a little bit, when did you first realize or understand that you are either gay, bisexual, lesbian, trans, if any of those things fit in for your identity? When did you first understand or realize that?
Yeah, I was fairly young when I figured that one out. I probably was around 6, I would say. I don't know. I guess because I grew up around it, I didn't have to like struggle with it per se to like figure out what was so different about me. It was kind of like I saw my aunt and her friends and her girlfriends, and I saw my mom and her friends and their boyfriends, and it was kind of like I think I like girls, and it felt very like organic in that way. And so it was never a struggle throughout like the rest of my years as a child. It was just something I identified with early and moved on.
So for me, I wasn't so lucky as to figure that out at such a young age, because it was something that was kind of a taboo topic. Not that anyone was overtly against anything, or it just wasn't talked about. It wasn't really seen in my family or my household. So it wasn't until college that I realized, because what I realized for myself is that technically I identify as bisexual, because I realized that my feelings for a person doesn't depend on their gender. It depended on the person itself, which matters more to me. Um, so yeah, it wasn't until that point, because I realized, you know, I let things happen organically, and I realized that it didn't have to be a man for me to have feelings for them. So it's my story.
Yeah, it was young. I I guess you could say I knew early on. I kind of just let it go by the wayside. I was considered the tomboy. Um, so guys were like my buddies, opposed to being attracted to them. And when I reached my teenage years, I never had a strong attraction to the guys, but all the females were, I had that attraction. And then when I went to college, that's when I decided to say, okay, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. But I knew early on that I was a little different than the other little girls in the neighborhood.
I would say I actually knew pretty early as well. I remember when I was a really little kid, I insisted to my parents that when you grow up, you get to pick your gender, whether you want to be a boy or a girl. And turns out that I was a little bit right about that, which has been great. But it was something that I think we didn't really know about when I was little. It was not like there were not trans people who were visible in my community. Um, and so it was not really something that I even realized could be an option. And so I think a lot of us ended up maybe transitioning or coming out later in life than we maybe would have wanted to. But I think it's also important to remember that it's never too late to transition or to come out. That that's something you can always do. and as long as you feel, completely safe and comfortable doing so. But you can always have that option of living really authentically as yourself.
Thanks, Cassie. Dee, when you spoke, something popped into my mind, and this is not at all to be disrespectful, but part of this conversation is to bring awareness to the culture and to stop the stereotypes that we as people are ingrained in us. So at 6 years old, you're very impressionable as children. We all are. Can you elaborate on the concept of being gay was pushed on you because you lived it as a child?
Um, oh, I hate that way of thinking. Hold on. Let me redirect my energy real quick. So
Thank you.
I I will say I like to use the term exposure. Was I exposed? Yes. Was it forced upon me or impressed upon me? No. I very much had the freedom to choose a lot of things as a child, and nobody did anything inappropriate in front of me or had inappropriate conversations and things of that nature. It's just that the development of that relationship, meaning my aunt and her friends, um, was just as organic for me to see as it was for my mother and her relationships with her boyfriends or things. So because it was never any stigma attached to it or any negativity attached to it, I just grew up seeing it as just another type of relationship. That allowed me to unbiasedly make whatever decision I felt like I wanted to make at that point for me. Like it was just, I felt like it was okay for me to like girls because it was okay for my aunt to like girls. She was successful. My grandmother loved her. You know, she lived a normal life. So it just helped me remove all the negativity attached to it. And I never felt like I had to be not authentic or struggle with how other people view me because I didn't care at that point. My family was good to go. As long as you have that foundation set for you, you feel like you can fight the world. With anything else, I never cared what anybody else thought about that. I got called all the derogatory terms around the neighborhood coming up through high school. Whenever you get into an argument with somebody, first thing they want to call you is a bull dyke, whatever term of endearment they want to throw at you. But none of that stuff hurt me because at home I could be me, and that gave me all the courage and confidence I needed to do anything else.
Is there a stigma with associated with being a member of the LGBTQ plus community?
Yes, yes, it is, and it goes from many, many years back. Um, it, so if you think about it, it takes just as long to change someone else's mind in another direction than it did for them to form that opinion in the first place. So if you're trying to alter views of people that could have possibly grew up in a household or around other people who weren't accepting of this lifestyle. So in turn, I need to undo everything you learned as a child. And here you are, almost 40 years old, and try to get you to understand that none of that stuff matters. I'm just me. So it takes a long time to alter that way of thinking, and people have to be receptive to it. In this society, we tend to force things down people's throats, and you don't like it because you have to like it, or the government says you have to like it. Like actually, you don't. Um, I don't seek acceptance of any kind. I seek respect because I respect others. Nobody's out here beating you up because you like men. I don't want you beating me up because I like women. That has nothing to do with you. So it is. I think we just need to really sit down and like Tiffany alluded to, just like do some self-assessment, like figure out what it is that makes you so uncomfortable about me and my lifestyle, because that has no direct burn on you. And then once we get to the root of your problem, all of a sudden I am not a problem.
I would say
Well,
there's definitely a lot of stigma associated with being trans, and so I can speak to what that looks like being a trans woman, which is oftentimes we're assumed to be predators. Like when for example when I go to the bathroom, I always get a little bit nervous that somebody's going to be mad that I'm in the women's bathroom. Because I think they might assume that I'm trying to harm someone, when really all I'm trying to do is go to the bathroom just like everybody else in the bathroom. And so, I think that's a stigma that I really want to be able to push against, is this idea that, trans people are like in any way threatening. We're not. We're the same as everybody else. We're just trying to live our lives. And so, I think it's important to name that piece of the stigma and really challenge it when you see it, whether it's inside yourself or in other people.
And I would just like to weigh on the stigma because it exists both inside and outside of the community. That bi people are just people who haven't made up their mind yet. Because there are straight people who believe that we just haven't found the right man. And then there are people in the LGBT community who thinks that, oh, we're just playing both sides of the fence, that we just can't make up our minds. And I think that's tough for bi people who really believe, that's not the point at all. There is no grass is greener on the other side because it's not based on their physical makeup. So it's something that we that the bi community in and of itself must fight against on both sides. So they're not seen up as less than because of what they identify as. So there's that.
Thank you. As we move about in society, one of the things that I have taken particular notice of is on emails and even on employees' name tags, there are pronouns associated with the person. How does a person ask you what your pronouns are without seemingly being disrespectful?
I'm happy to answer this question. So for me, it is really just that simple. I think the best way to do it is say, "Hey, sorry, do you mind just letting me know your pronouns?" And I think that's a really totally polite, totally appropriate way to do it. It's actually, I think, a lot better than trying to guess, and guessing the wrong way. And I think people will see that you're coming from a place of respect. You're coming from a place of trying to treat other people the way they want to be treated. And so, I think that level of politeness, and just candor is more than welcome.
I agree. I was actually asked this question for the first time this past week, and I agree. What are your pronouns? Um, it's a very easy, straightforward question. I feel like there's actually respect coming from that question because you want to be, you want to protect that person and honor however they choose to identify as, or however they determine, however they decide to represent themselves, or whichever pronouns they choose. There we go.
Can anyone explain or just describe what stereotypes you have encountered and how those stereotypes have impacted your sense of self?
So I think I think a lot of people assume that like dominant women, like the more masculine women, like we want to be men. I promise you that's not the case. We don't. We thoroughly enjoy our womanhood. Uh, we just like what we like in terms of how we dress or how we function in our relationship. Because not every dominant woman looks like a man. To be honest, like you will come across some dominant women that look quite feminine. Um, I I don't know why people get so caught up in the role that you play in the relationship. Like it's literally just two women doing whatever they do, however they vibe. It could look like two best friends, but they're in a relationship. Like whatever works for them. I just think people need to get away from what they think they know, because I try to not tell straight people how to be straight. So I would like if straight people stop telling me how to be gay. It'd probably work out a lot better that way.
I have to agree with D. I get the same scenario. I have I have wide shoulders, a little bit taller than average, and people just assume me. But if you see me and my wife together, it's like, okay, who's doing what? And I've even had people ask us that question. It's to me, it's rude and insulting. And if you knew my wife, it didn't turn out well. So, but yeah, it's I've had that stereotype. I've been called Mr. or Sir, and then I turn around or ignore them, and then there's the anger. Oh, you ignore me when I turn around to address. No one knows what to say, instead of a simple apology. Um, so, and I've had friends that were more muscular and more manly, so to speak, than me, that were not gay at all, you know. So I think people do stereotypically look at, a person's physique or the outcome and just assume that, hey, yeah, they are, or, you know, instead of actually getting to know the person or taking the time, taking 2 extra seconds to just address the person as who they are when you see them. So I ran across that a lot.
I, as a feminine, outward facing, bisexual or lesbian, I don't get much, but I did realize that there is a bit of a stereotype or stigma against LGBT people being teachers. I didn't know that existed because I was a teacher, and at one point I was, I don't want to say reprimanded, that might be a little harsh, but I was talked to about letting my status be known to my students, despite heterosexual couples who worked for the school inviting over their boyfriends or spouses or talking about their relationships. I was censored a little bit when it came to that because I dated women, or I was in a relationship with a woman at the time. So that's the one time I did experience that and realize that exists. But otherwise, I guess I'm on the easier side of the spectrum because people often assume when they look at me. So the most I get is I'll say I'm married and they say, "Oh, well, what's your husband's name?" And I'll immediately correct them and say, "Well, my wife's name is," and we go on through that. We go on about our business, but other than that, yeah, not too bad here.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo what Tiffany said about teachers. I actually was a teacher before this position, and I think there's a lot of assumptions that we're trying to convert your children, which is absolutely not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to you know teach teach our students about the world the same way any other teacher is, and being who we are is a part of that. Um, if we're not being authentic about ourselves as teachers, I think we're often doing a disservice to our students. And then also, I think it really signals to students who are in the LGBTQ community that they aren't welcome if they see their teachers getting censored or told don't dress like this, don't talk about this. That message can be really harmful to our kids, and so that's I think a stereotype that we do really need to be aware of and challenge.
So, Tiffany and Cassie, how did you handle that situation, being teachers and being told to censor who you are?
Well, at the time, I had just gotten out of college, and this is one of my first I, real jobs, I guess I would call it. Um, so I didn't put up a fight. I backed down. It wasn't something that I talked about because I didn't necessarily want to rock the boat at that time. Um, I was new into the community, and I just wasn't prepared. I wasn't at a place where I felt it was the time or the place to combat that. I was more concerned with the learning of my students and being able to do my job to the best of my ability rather than fight the system that was wrong anyway.
I was pretty lucky in that at my last school, I was actually in a position to really push for my own rights to be open as I am, because I was the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer at the school. So in that sense, I was very fortunate to be the person sitting at the table saying, this is how we should treat people. But I think what a lot of LGBTQ teachers end up doing is being supportive for those students who really need the help. But then, at the same time, also not really feeling like they can tell everybody. So, those students who either pick up on it or just need that extra layer of support, maybe they're not getting it at home or with their friends. The fact that they can confide in a teacher about what they're feeling, I think is a really valuable service that LGBTQ teachers can offer.
How do we address the conversation with some members of the majority that the addition of women, people of color, and other underrepresented groups is an action that is mutually beneficial, especially in the workplace?
I mean, I think difference is hard for people. Unfamiliarity is hard for people. And so, if you've lived your entire life not interacting with a certain group of people, you're going to make a lot of assumptions about them. And so, really, to me, it goes back to what Tiffany said earlier, the idea of challenging our own bias of what we might think about people. I always think the very first step is just becoming aware that you have a bias. And then from there, you can really start trying to undo that and challenge that within yourself. And so that's, I think, what I would ask of really any employee in the workforce is to take those steps to really identify the biases that you might have and how those could be affecting other people or how you treat other people. And then from there, I think we can really move forward. It's important to meet people where they are, I think. But at the same time, we want to make sure that the workplace is inclusive for everybody. And so that has to be the expectation, is that we can get everybody to that place of treating one another with respect and dignity.
I've experienced this in the military a lot. When you join the military, you get thrown into a group of people you never know who they are, where they come from, or any aspects of their life. I found out that direct approach of facing our bias, understanding that just because we were raised this way may not be the right way, or this isn't the correct. To assume a person is this way isn't correct, and people don't realize that until they're faced with that. They think that what they've been taught is, that's it. There's no change until they're forced to change. And most people don't like change, but once they get there, and I found out that a lot of people don't like change because they don't want to feel like they're being left out. So if we, you know, teach them how to be included and learn that, hey, yeah, they're a little different, but they're really truly no different than me. It helps a lot. You're always going to have most people generally, when you throw them together like that or force that change upon them, you they accept it and go about and learn to adjust and are willing and want to make that change. But you always have that few that you have to accept and say, okay, it's going to be a little rougher for these guys. So, it's going to take a little while longer, but you can't stop pushing. You can't stop teaching. You can't stop educating. Um, I've learned that once you stop doing that, you lose everybody. Because somebody at some point is going to be left out and they're going to feel left out. So that's how I have gotten used to over the last years of initiating change and educating people on the differences within our culture and society.
I think we never approach this idea of being like culturally competent, is what I like to call it. Where you should approach it at, which is exactly what Cassie and Tiffany talked about, and that's in the school with kids while they're young and they're sponges and they're malleable, instead of fighting with some 40-year-olds who have all these concrete thoughts of society and different cultures. Like, trying to undo that is so much more complicated than actually taking a child and exposing them in a healthy way and explaining to them what this is and what this is, and just helping them understand life before it comes at them like a ton of bricks. And then, because you take this child who's never been exposed, you know, for me, I'd never been exposed to any like white people as a child. I grew up in a very predominantly black neighborhood. My schools were predominantly black. So I get this job down at the National Aquarium, and I'm like surrounded by white people. I'm like, feel a little uncomfortable. I feel outnumbered here. You know, I shouldn't feel outnumbered. They're still people. But because I had that lack of exposure, that's how I felt. And so as a child, I feel like if you just expose your kids to more things and stop letting like the TV and Facebook do the teaching for them, that, you know, I was blessed. I don't know how I grew up like this, but I actually had teachers who were gay that I learned so much from. One of my godparents is a transgendered female. So I got exposed to all these things, and as an adult, was never uncomfortable around any of it. So I know that helped, learning at that age, instead of me trying to undo some of my ways of thinking at this age. Because I'm a stubborn Taurus. So how I feel about things is typically how I feel about them until some act of God or force of nature makes me change my mind. So I just think we need to attack it where it should be attacked at, and that's the youth.
If diversity is what we have, you know, that's a given. We are a diverse society. And inclusion is what we do. The sense of belonging is a feeling. How can we ensure that the LGBTQ plus community is a part of that equation?
This goes along with what I was going to answer for the last question, is that, as you may know, the federal government is a very, or used to be a very homogeneous population, which means everyone looked exactly the same. As they started inviting more men, women, and people of color, women, and other categories, I think it's very important still to this day to put yourself at those tables. Like Cassie mentioned, that she was in a position when she was at the school to be able to bring light to a situation. Well, I think that we have the ability to do that in our own organizations as well. And I think that's important, so that you can make sure that other people are represented, even by presenting an idea, because maybe did grow up in a community where it's everyone looks exactly the same. Maybe they never even thought about it. The idea didn't occur to them that, hey, maybe I should invite people who are different than I am. So I think it's important, to put ourselves, those who represent other communities, in those places where we can help enlighten or bring others like ourselves into those spaces.
I think Tiffany really nailed it there. The one thing I want to add from my perspective as a white diversity practitioner is the importance of also making space for other people at the table, and using my privilege and my position to lift others up. You know, we're not really doing anybody any service if we you know, slam the door on the people behind us. We need to be opening the doors, bringing other people in with us. And that's, I think, the most important way that we really can advocate for belonging and diversity and inclusion, is, you know, simply making sure that the people who need to be at the table can be at the table, and that their voices can be heard.
I think learning and education and communication are big factors in this process. I mean, learning is an active process, and so you have to actively engage in it. You have to want to know about this thing you know nothing about in order to receive it and store it properly. You know, it's communication is a big thing for me, especially like in me and Mo's line of work, because we're often functioning amongst a vast educational level, so to speak, in the city. Not everybody will always understand you where you are, but you better understand them where they are. So if any part of that communication is damaged, whether it be the person sending the message itself, or the person receiving it, then there's no communication taking place. So I think people just have to be willing and open to learning the unknown. You know, the same as with that book you've never read. Like, the title piques your interest, you're gonna pick it up and read it. So don't skip to the back. Just be open, be honest with yourself, and just understand that this. I think it's become bigger than what it really should be. Never in my life did I ever think I'd be sitting somewhere discussing like what I do behind closed doors. All the time, but it happens all the time. You know, people had, and I don't mind educating people. I guess because it was so small to me coming up that I never thought I'd be in my adult life just constantly asking people, like, for that seat at the table, like, I can't sit down because I mess with women. Wow, Jesus, maybe I shouldn't just tell anybody. Like, it's weird to me. This is very foreign to me, and I know it happens. I get it, but it's just I think sometimes we make things bigger than what they have to be. So if we could just get back to like really getting to know each other as people, and not the color of your skin, or who you sleep with, or who you identify as, because those are all like very personal things that you don't change about you. You know, I can't change that I'm gay. You can't change that you're black. So if we just get away from the things that will never change, we can put our energy where it should be, and it's just kind of getting to know the things that we can change. And that one of those things is how we educate ourselves and how we communicate.
Dee, you mentioned education and learning. So if law enforcement were to make an arrest, what should they be mindful of when interacting with a member of the LGBTQ plus community?
Hold on, I was waiting for this question. This was my question. So I had an incident, domestic in nature. I was actually injured in that incident, and the police officer showed up, and I am visibly injured in this incident. Probably at that point needing some medical assistance. And the first thing that officer said to me was, if you weren't gay, it probably wouldn't have happened. Yeah. So I've had a couple of run-ins with police on the clock as a firefighter medic, at the hospital as a nurse. I'm not sure how to even broach that topic, because there's so much that needs to take place at like the entry level of a police officer. You know, in terms of I know you guys do psych evals. I get it, but maybe they need to be a little bit more in depth if you're gonna be running around with a badge and a gun, because I think that with that level of responsibility and accountability, like it should be vetted a little better, in my opinion. So I would just say that I'm a little jaded when it comes to police and how they interact with the LGBTQ. I've seen some things that I really wish I could unsee, and I've been in some arguments at work that really did not need to take place on a professional level, but just in terms of education generally. I just think that how you vet your officers is important, and in exposure early and often. Because once they get into the habit of doing things a certain way, it's hard to undo those habits. Those bad habits are really hard to break. How they interact with people is really hard to break. And respect is a mutual thing. It's not automatically given. I don't respect badges. I respect people.
In a similar way that diversity and inclusion has become a big thing at the workplace, and looking at biases, I think that's something that definitely needs to come to play at the very entry levels. Training for officers or those who are in any position of authority, really, so that they learn what a bias even is, how to handle that, and then how to potentially remove that from the equation. because nothing about my outward appearance or how I identify should change how you treat me, especially when it comes to the people who are supposed to be there to protect and serve you. So I agree that education needs to come in at the bottom level, not 10 years, not 15 years, not 20 years after serving, because like mentioned before, it's very hard to break old habits. It takes time. So building good habits at the beginning is of vital importance, because it doesn't matter if it's LGBT, if it's Black, if it's Asian American, whatever they identify as, it shouldn't matter. And that's very important, yeah, for those who we're supposed to be able to depend on, to get that education and exposure very, very early.
I think I would ask police officers to be really mindful of the power that they hold, and the difference in power between me and a police officer. Oftentimes, you know, we talked about stereotypes earlier. Um, if there were an interaction with a police officer and something went wrong, a lot of times the assumption would be that it was my fault as, you know, a queer person or as a trans person. And so, you know, being mindful of that piece of it, that they do really have a lot of authority and a lot of power, and that really is going to shape how they interact with us and how they're perceived. And I think coming into situations with that awareness brings with it a higher level of caution and respect. And so that's what I would recommend.
Thank you. Out of respect for time, I know Mosette has a plane to catch in about 7 minutes. I have about 2 more questions. How would you support a loved one who expresses interest in pursuing a career in law enforcement?
I would hope that exposure to me would actually help them in their journey becoming a culturally competent officer. I really feel like you got to be the change you want to see. And so I know I understand that the job is extremely difficult. And so I wouldn't knock it. I'm not willing to do it because I've dedicated my life to fire service. But, you know, I think people just need to get exposure. Like my loved one would definitely be exposed to me, so they definitely would be exposed to his lifestyle because there's no part of me that's hidden. And so I feel like echoing Tiffany's sentiment, like you just get that exposure early and often, and not just to LGBTQ, but to anything that you have a unnecessary fear or bias of, expose yourself to it, because then it'll help you regulate that sense of you know, bias in you. You'll be able to do those self checks before you hit the scene. Like, oh God, here we go with the Black people again, or here we go with the Asians again. Like all that stuff will get tossed to the wayside if you just expose yourself in a non-authoritative way, so that way you can soak up everything without, you know, your gun and badge being what dictates that moment.
We have to first and foremost treat each other as we wanted to be treated. That's the basic. That's what I would tell them. You know, if you go in with an open mind and treat everyone, no matter the situation, and I know it gets sticky and you come across everything. But if that bottom line stays the same, that foundation stays the same, where you're treating everyone, regardless of the situation, the way you would want to be treated in a situation, um, have that educational background to back you up, I think we would have a lot better police officers. They would look at things in a wider scope, as opposed to you know, I've ran across some officers with that narrow scope where they only see, you know, the LBG community as this, or, you know, I'm in this Black neighborhood, and then, you know, we dealt with some firefighters and paramedics that have the same thing, that we have to pull aside and say, look, I understand what you might think, but this is what's going to happen. These people need our help regardless of what you know, what your background is. you're gonna treat them with the respect that they deserve now. So, and I made some friends, and I lost some friends with that. But I think that foundation has to be set that you have to treat everyone the way you wanted to be treated. Once you have that, it's kind of hard to go away from that and look at someone in a derogatory sense. So for me, that's what I've used, and it's worked out.
We have about a minute, so if Cassie could give me a 30-second response on how would you support a loved one who wanted to pursue a career in law enforcement?
Yeah, I think I would just say, don't lose sight of the reason that you want to do that, which is, to serve and protect your community. And so that means being a part of the community, really knowing and learning about the community that you're in. And then also remembering that, your job at the end of the day is to serve and protect, which means that first you have to think about, how do I come into this situation while minimizing harm done.
And Tiffany?
Being as I have a very diverse community, I would encourage all of them, if they want to pursue that career path, to do it, because I think that representation matters. And I think that it's important for different types of people to join the force so that they're represented and they can bring some light. There's so much you can learn on the outside, but when it's in your ranks, I think there's even more opportunity to learn because you're interacting with these people every day. You get to see firsthand that first and foremost, they're people. So yeah, I would encourage it actually. Yeah.
I have one final question, and Mo said you can answer this first, and if you need to sign off afterwards, I understand. If you could tell your younger self anything at all, what would it be?
I I think I would congratulate myself. I grew up, had a lot of siblings. Like I said, I knew younger that I was gay, and I accepted it within myself. I joined the military into a career field that was 95% male, um, and stuck with it my whole career when most females did not. And then I joined the fire department, which is another career field that's, 99% males. We got 2% females, and I if I put my mind to it, it was hard to derail me and not do what I want to do. Um, I had my flaws, I had my setbacks, but I always pushed forward. So I would have to congratulate myself and say, way to stick with it instead of becoming something everyone else wanted me to be. I became what I wanted to be. Um, and talking to diversity, I love it. Sitting in that that meeting, and they walk in, and I'm the only female, and I'm the highest ranking female in the room. Um, a lot of guys do that step back and say, okay, wow, she's the first Black female that I've seen as a chief master sergeant in maintenance. And they always double take, and I'm like, yeah, I came up the hard way just like you did. So it's been very rewarding for me. And like I said, I would have to tell myself, you made your mistakes, but you're ready to bounce back and keep pushing.
Thanks, Mo. If you have to sign off, I understand. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, I want to hear everybody else coming now.
All right. Tiffany, if you could tell your younger self anything at all, what would it be?
I would tell myself that your feelings are valid. I question and second guess myself a lot, because when you feel a way that's not what you see, there's no representation around you, you wonder if it's really what you're feeling or not. You question yourself a lot, and sometimes you internalize those things and look for outlets that aren't the most productive or the best for your well-being. So I think that I would, yeah, tell myself that, your feelings are valid. You have a right to feel them. They're real, and you have every right to also express them. It's not something that you need to bottle up. And if you do bottle up, it's not the best for your mental health. So you want to be a healthy person, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Recognize that.
Cassie?
I think I would tell myself to not be afraid. I think I spent a lot of my childhood and young adulthood sort of being afraid of, parts of myself, or, um, you know, asking for things, like feeling like I deserved things, feeling like I should be in the place where I am, and you know, finding that courage inside myself has been really the most valuable possible thing I could do, because it allows me to feel comfortable taking a seat at the table, advocating for others, living as myself as authentically as I can, and forming those connections with other people through authenticity. So yeah, I would just tell myself, don't be so afraid. You've got this, and believe in yourself.
Indeed.
So initially, when you asked this question, the first thing that popped in my mind was I would tell my younger self to stay away from straight women. But then I was like, wait a minute, pause. I need to let me think about a more serious answer. So I'm going to take a page from Mo's book and say that I would definitely tell myself, like, do exactly what you're doing. I think I'm a pretty awesome person. I love tooting my own horn because I put in the work to get where I'm at. I know I'm not done. I know it's a lot more to learn, a lot more to do, a lot more to see. But I would definitely, as a child, I know I was driven. I was a sponge. I soaked up everything, and I know it allowed me to get at least to this point in life. So I feel like I took the path that was laid out for me. I just walked it. I pat myself on the back and stay away from straight women.
Thank you all so very much for taking the time today to share your culture with us. I am beyond grateful and encouraged that by having these types of conversations, it broadens our understanding and enriches our cultural and emotional intelligence. Be blessed and stay safe. Thanks again.
Thank you.